please. Takes a couple of seconds till it's, yeah, great. So it's my great pleasure to introduce our presenters today. So we have Guillaume Forger. He's the Managing Director of e-signature product manager of Cryptomathic. And we have from Swisscom Trust Services side, Ingolf Rau, who's heading up design and lifecycle management. If you both could give a quick introduction about yourself, Guillaume, what you do, what the focus of Cryptomathic is, and then quickly also from Ingolf, please.
Okay, very good. I mean, I'm Guillaume Forger. I mean, I joined the company almost 15 years ago, and I have actually contributed to the promotion of remote signing in Europe. So Cryptomathic is a company headquartered in Denmark. We actually believed in remote signing from the very beginning, so we're a pioneer in this field. Initially as a software company, so providing remote signature software and also very active in the remote signing space. And today we're proud to announce the selected signing service that we have built in cooperation with Swisscom, and Ingolf was instrumental in making this cooperation happen.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, hi, my name is Ingolf. I'm engineer and was a long time ago at Siemens for certainly 20 years. This was a very good play field to have the first experiences with electronic signatures. Afterwards, I changed to SwissSign for the product management, and now since a couple of years, I'm head of the product management of Swisscom Trust Services. We are the trust service provider, also for Cryptomathic. I know Guillaume since a couple of years. We're working together in different projects, and so this is now our common baby we will present today.
Great stuff, and great to have you on today. With that, we go to the next slide and have a quick overview of the agenda. We already checked off the introduction. We will be talking about the business requirements for global organization, then the focus on the selected signing server as core technology. And Guillaume will talk about Cryptomathic Signer and what you see is what you sign. Then also selected signing service Trust Anchor, presented by Ingolf, and the last point is implementing the strategy before we go to a questions and answers session. And with that, Guillaume, you have the word, and please take us through your presentation.
Okay, yeah, thanks for the introduction, Marco. I will first start with how can we actually ensure business continuity during COVID. I guess all of you were probably monitoring the situation very closely. I mean, COVID had a serious impact on our day-to-day world. And especially for large organization, it is actually very challenging to serve existing clients. So, many of you are actually familiar with business continuity. Business continuity is critical, but actually a scenario where during almost a year, we encourage people to stay at home and avoid social contact. This is very disrupting, and which actually raises a question for large businesses: how can I actually continue to deliver my services to my clients without meeting in person, without having any branch that people can go to? And a key aspect which we actually had in the branches locally was to actually have a legally binding consent. And I very often describe the signature as a little ceremony at the end of the process. So people that would actually agree upon something would actually shake hands and sign physically. This is completely out of fashion. So people need to invent or reinvent themselves to switch or have the ceremony that they had in the offline world in an online world. with being a pure digital player, to be able to serve clients from the beginning to the end in a digital fashion. So that actually implies that we revamp our internal processes. It's not only about signing, it's about ensuring that the business content is delivered to the client at any time, on any device, and in a frictionless way. So it's a key challenge. The electronic signature was actually invented many years ago, but it's really only now that the technology is really rocketing. We have some legal standards to comply against. I mean, in the offline world, the legal certainty is, so to say, granted with an apparatus of law and regulations, which actually apply for the banking industry, for the telco industry, but for many others also. When we digitalize the signature experience, we have to do this with a certain level of legal certainty. And depending on where you operate, in which jurisdiction you are, and I know, I mean, some of you, I mean, we looked at the attendees. Some of you are in China, some of you are the vast majority are in Europe, some of you are in Switzerland, and we have different jurisdictions here. And the digital signature laws actually differ. So what's qualified somewhere is not always recognized as qualified elsewhere. You have countries that have a principle of equivalence, and some other countries do not. Another key challenge that you have when you digitalize and when you actually want to keep control is you need to ensure that the data is protected. So not only the data about your identities, which is typically what is actually crucial in a digital signature. So you need to be able to identify who signed what at what time. But businesses also have the challenge to comply against data protection laws. Where people have a right to be forgotten, where people have a right to protect their own data, and the financial institution of this place also want to ensure that the data is not disclosed to third parties. So that's another challenge that we will actually look at. And the last challenge to actually ensure business continuity with an adequate level of trust is to be able to onboard clients in a way that can be trustworthy. I mean, if I see you in person, I have a certain degree of confidence. This actually vanishes to a certain extent when you converse online. So we need to be able to reinvent ourselves, and not only with having a digital identity, but we also need to have user-centric business processes where we can follow the user journey and ensure that at any point in the workflow that we always have a user who's identified and whose identity can be used to consume services, and not the other way around. The identity itself is never the end story for a business owner. The ultimate purpose is always to conduct transactions, and digital identities and electronic signatures are here to serve the client. So if we look at global organization, and I know many of you actually work in several jurisdictions, very often you actually want to leverage an existing technology and try to deploy it in a number of data centers and or jurisdictions to meet your business requirements. So if we speak to a large insurance company, a large bank, or a large telco provider, they will have hundreds, if not thousands, of document types to sign. They actually differ from one region to the next. Some would be written under Swiss law, some others under German law, some others under maybe Singapore law, and some require actually different type of data. So some are to be signed by one individual, others are to be signed by several individuals. So there's a certain level of complexity here. In the day-to-day process, I mean, very often the advisor would actually fill in some data. For instance, when you want to register a loan, then the banker would actually do some operation by himself. Others are actually done in a back office somewhere else before the document can be presented to the signatory or signatories for their approval and user binding consent and legally binding consent. Sorry. So that's one process which is very often a challenge for large organization to fully digitalize online. Another aspect is these documents, they actually need to be executed and have a certain legal effect. So, and that actually is bound to national law. So we have different laws that actually work and interact with one another. So you have the digital signature law, which is one, but you also have some additional text which will actually state what can be done with a given document. So for instance, if you want to sign an employment contract in Germany, you need to do it under the so-called Schriftform. And that Schriftform requires that you have a qualified electronic signature. And if you digitalize that process, then you will need to be able to have a QES that is valid under German law. So, and that's not easy to look into if you have thousands of document types which refer to different jurisdictions and which actually have different fulfillment forms. So that's a key element. Another element to consider when you consider your global digitalization strategy in regards to electronic signature is the legal framework that you refer to. In Europe, it's, I would say, pretty standard. EIDAS is now well known, it's enforced, so it's a regulation that actually applies on a pan-European level, which introduces a principle of equivalence with handwritten signature for qualified electronic signatures. And these signatures are valid across all EU member states. So that actually makes it relatively easy to a certain degree. But when you actually leave Switzerland, or leave the European Union and go to Switzerland, then you have the challenge again. So how do you ensure that your signature is also valid under Swiss law if you have a contract drafted under Swiss law? And if you go elsewhere, you have some countries where this principle of equivalent does not exist. So for instance, in the USA, what actually is valid is that you have some admissibility of electronic signature before a court. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you have this principle of equivalence. So the legal value of the digital signature can be challenged. So if the audit trail or the identification process or the security mechanism is too weak, maybe years after you signed, you can realize that the signature was not strong enough because it is challenged by a legal owner or a third party. And if the judge has reasons to believe that the electronic signature security can be questioned, then you will have a very hard time. You need legal certainty generally. Another process when you think globally and need to act locally, like it is the case for all organizations, is that you generally need to ensure data privacy. You need to be able to segregate data between your different booking centers or your jurisdictions. And last but not least, it is also a technical challenge. So you need to ensure that you have a smooth, frictionless user experience, which is available on most devices. And we'll actually look into that later on. Okay, I mean, if I look at the key challenges now, and I hope that the next slide is now on display, digitalization of the signature user experience. You have different elements that you need to consider. On the right-hand side, I highlighted what you do in the offline world. In the offline world, you go and meet, and you will have the user consent at different degrees. So if you go, for instance, and buy some bread, you will actually ask, oh, can I get a baguette? And the baker owner or the sales agent will take that as a transaction. You pay and off you go. You don't need to sign anything. You don't need to tick anything. If you go to another level and want to actually have a higher transaction, so you would pre-order maybe 20 breads at a time, then the baker in that case will want you to just acknowledge that you have a transaction ongoing. So he might actually present you with a slip of paper and say, well, I, Guillaume Forget, want to actually buy 20 breads to be delivered on Friday. And that will be ticked. And you have an audit trail. And if you go to a higher level and say, well, you know, I'd like to buy the entire bakery, then he will actually want to have a transaction which is recognized, which has some legal value. And in most countries, you actually go before a notary and have a deed. And if you actually want to transpose all these use cases in the online world, I mean, the legal framework has introduced different assurance levels. And these assurance levels are, I mean, in Switzerland and in Europe, recognized as simple, advanced, and qualified. Qualified being the highest assurance level. There are still a few transactions that cannot be done online, but the vast majority, probably 95, if not 100% of most business cases, can be digitalized when the adequate assurance level is delivered. So Cryptomathic and Swisscom, we actually have worked together on reaching the highest assurance level possible. So not only in Switzerland, but also in Europe and also in additional countries, thereby being able to deliver a trustworthy user experience for most use cases. And the key elements that are required to actually achieve that in all these jurisdictions is to ensure first that you have a trustworthy user identity. And in the way we actually design the selected signing service, we offer different possible approaches. I mean, the traditional one is to still ensure that you have a face-to-face identification process where the user is identified, he's presented with some terms which will state how the certificate is to be used, what legal value it has, and how to revoke it if you desire so at a certain point in time. So that's a, so to say, face-to-face registration process, which can be delegated to another entity. The second process, which is very popular these days, is to actually carry out the ivory process through a video session, potentially in live stream. And that's an area where Swisscom invested quite some resources into automating or partially automating and making it secure to actually have a video stream that can be verified later on, where the identity documents can be verified live during the process and still check for some liveliness on the other end. Another technique to register user, which is slowly emerging in European countries, especially in the Nordics, is to have or to be able to refer to an EID scheme. So someone would actually have verified the identity at a given point in time and will be able to assert that I am who I claim to be. So these notified EID schemes, the requirements have been set in EIDAS. I mean, the EID part is especially targeted to address this. And if you are registered in a given European country, this can be used as a trustworthy source to deliver and guarantee to the trust service provider, in that case Swisscom, that you are who you claim to be. The second part of the digital signature experience is the non-repudiable part. So the non-repudiation is achieved by having three principles. The first principle is we need to have a certain to a certain degree to be certain or almost certain that what is displayed on the screen is effectively what is being signed in the background. This is what we actually have coined in the late 90s at Cryptomathic: what you see is what you sign, vis-a-vis in short terms. And it's easier said than done because you can have man-in-the-middle attacks, you can have man-in-the-browser attacks, and it's actually quite difficult to ensure that over these three parties, where you have an e-business application provider, a user, and a trust center, that and the trust center typically never knows which document you actually have, and the link between the user and the trust center is typically remote. It's difficult to ensure that you can effectively deliver this what you see is what you sign experience. And at Cryptomathic, we actually worked over several years into the design and the implementation of vis-a-vis techniques, whereby a document starts at a given loop of trust and can be rendered securely to the user, and that we can actually have a user sole control over a security channel which is used to activate a key remotely. And that is actually down to a sound security framework. To achieve that, Cryptomathic launched a very demanding common criteria certification, which we did in the Netherlands with Brightsight and TÜV IT to be recognized as a QSCD. And today, I mean, earlier this year, we received the common criteria certificate and a QSCD certificate for the solution. And this is exactly what has been installed in the Swisscom data center and connected to the trust anchor, which is a CA. And the last but not least, you have to comply with digital signature law to actually be able to fully demonstrate the non-repudiation part. And this is done in most cases by going through an audit. The auditor that we have for Switzerland, but also for EIDAS is KPMG, so they are registered and they actually need to verify a large list of security controls, and Ingolf will speak about that a bit later. Another element to deliver the signature experience is to ensure, especially for large organizations, that you can have multiple tenants allocated to multiple booking centers. It can be a challenge to serve a global organization and deliver the same technology while still keeping some Chinese walls between them to ensure that the data is segregated, to ensure that we can also deliver a smooth user experience, because security is not always a good friend of usability. And being able to deliver both at the same time with no user impairment is a challenge. So to implement this a sound digital signature strategy, I mean, the key drivers are summarized here. So you need to be able to transform your digital processes. You need to ensure that you will have a business continuity, that you have a certain SLA which people can commit to. You also need to have a non-repudiation concept implemented, and that will actually help you reduce cost and time to market. And last but not least, if your users are able to sign smoothly, then you typically have better conversion rate in your business processes. So to be able to sign like it is shown on the right hand side, it should be as easy as this. The challenges are typically on the organization side. In COVID, many organizations said, well, I need to implement this and implement this now. But if we look at the number of items to look at, this requires a certain expertise. So this requires that you have a company, a partner that can help you digitalize these processes. It's actually very easy to take the wrong decision and go for an easy service provider that will just give you access to an API where the service behind is not really audited, where the security is not really enforced. In that case, the legal value that is being delivered will be very weak. So you need to have a partner with some expertise, and you will need to keep a certain ownership over the signature service that you offer to your clients. You will also need to be sure that you get some verified identities. So even if you become the RA and if you actually are in charge, and there are a number of things that you need to comply against, you also need to ensure that the security is verified by your team. So you have to actually align different teams in your organization. The business teams that is in control of the workflow, the security team that will look at the implementation, but also the compliance team. And you need to do that in all the jurisdictions when you deliver the solution. So now we will speak more about the selected signing service. So in a nutshell, as the input, you will have some data to be signed and some ID credentials. And at the output, you will have signed data at the QES level. And the selected signing service is what we provide in the middle. We provide the necessary technology, which is rendered as a service to deliver the signing experience. And it can leverage existing processes. So you can leverage your existing KYC or and become the RA by yourself. You can also be and have the authentication services potentially. I mean, if it's recognized as secure enough, and we typically advise our customers in that. And we will deliver the what you see, what you sign experience, which is represented on this picture. The what you see, what you sign is actually a key element and one of the unique selling points of the Cryptomatic implementation. So we have this loop of trust that I highlighted earlier, where the e-business application provider implements the VC solution. The signer is the QSCD component. It's in the trust center domain, and you of course have the end user, the signatory, that will visualize the document. And this is what VC does. So it actually introduces this loop of trust to ensure that the document or the contract that you have at the beginning is effectively rendered, visualized, and signed by its intended signatory. And that it can actually withstand most attacks. So man-in-the-middle attacks, but also other type of attacks. The implementation that we have is multi-tenant capable. So at Cryptomathic, we work hard to have this segregation, to have a strong logical split between tenant, which actually fits very well with the representation that you have in the financial industry, where clients are booked in a booking center. So large organization would actually have several booking centers to cover their entire operation. Another element is that it should be multi-policy capable, so be able to deliver electronic signature at different levels and in accordance with different jurisdiction. So we can deliver qualified, we can deliver advanced, we can deliver it as per EIDAS, but also as per ZDF, which is the Swiss signature law. But we also look at other type of signatures to cover your entire jurisdiction. So we can actually plug different CA providers and reach out to a trust center in Singapore, whereby we still have the same technology, the same APIs, but you have an additional policy to sign under Singapore law. And we can repeat that in other jurisdictions also. Another element is we must be able to support multiple IDPs. An IDP is an identity provider that typically also acts as a single sign-on solution within your business processes. And if you have an IDP, the IDP would assert that the user has been strongly authenticated and has authorized a certain element. And this is represented in a so-called SAML assertion. And if you have a booking center where you operate globally, then you will be able to use that as secure activation data to activate the key. So we can also support other types of authentication, including SMS-based OTPs for very easy user enrollment. And we can also use other methods. And here you see OpenID Connect, which is a standard and very popular standard for IDPs. The selected signing service can be delivered in different variants. The first variant is to use a native API. So by default, when you become a tenant of the selected signing service, the first thing you get is you get a license for the so-called VC server, and you have two external APIs. So you have an API to register a user and establish a certificate for a given policy. And as a tenant, you can invoke that service, provided that you have registered as an array and that you comply. So that's the first API. The second one is to integrate on the signing part. So the VC can be implemented in your own processes. So you actually have to plug in your DMS and you can customize the user experience, the UI, as you want it to be. And the sole control channel is delivered through the signing API. So you have two APIs, and you can ask your developers to integrate. So that's the first method, the so-called native integration. The second one, I will present it a bit later on. It's an e-consent digital signature consent module, which is used primarily for digital banking, but also in the insurance sector. So what we have done for certain banks in the private banking industry is that you already have some core banking solutions, such as ClearLogix, Temenos, maybe Upway or Avalog, that will actually deliver the digital banking experience already. It can be on a mobile, it can be on a browser, but generally you can introduce notification. You can also manage some content, some documents, and the advisors can help trigger the process. So what we have delivered with a partner is that we have some technology to integrate within the core banking solution to allow for a workflow for advisors and signatories, so that they can be registered in an automated way, and we can push messages onto their mobile phone to say, hey, you have a new, the loan that you requested a few days ago has now been approved, so you can carry on and sign it, and we'll show some sample UI later. So that's the second method. The third method is that we work with another a partner to deliver a so-called signature portal. What is a signature portal? Is if you do not want to touch APIs or code, then but you still want to have a certain footprint on your experience, you can install the portal, and the portal is fully integrated with the backend. It delivers functionality to allow users to file certain documents and distribute these documents to signatories. And the entire process is automated. So you get notified by email, and you can sign. You can handle one or multiple signatories, and the document can be uploaded either manually, or if you want to have a certain degree of automation, there's also an API. So each uploader would create a file, would for one or several documents, which are typically in PDF. The PDF are sent and distributed, and the workflow is managed entirely by the solution. So if we look at the digital banking content solution, so here is an example where we would actually click on Start. It's integrated with the backend, so we use the same WAF as what is being implemented in the bank, and the same SSO solution. And here we see that you have some pending agreements on the right-hand side. So you go and can click onto that. And if you see that one needs to have your consent, so for instance, here the document in the safe would be rendered. So you have here an address change management, which is presented to the user. The vis-a-vis part would render the data to the user. We ensure that all pages are read. And at the end of the process, you are asked to provide your confirmation with an assertion which is still done using the central SSO solution. At the end, the document is signed and is circulated to the core banking system, via the core banking system, to the document owners or the third party that actually rely on the transaction. The second example is the portal that I highlighted earlier. So the portal has this built-in workflow for single signing or batch signing, with where one or multiple signatories can sign. It will track. So here you see a mortgage application that has been presented to a user. So we see that we have several documents. So you have the mortgage agreement, an application, and an insurance form, and you will see which one have been signed and which one has not been signed. So and maybe in that process, some need to be signed by 2 or 3 persons, and others would only be signed by one given signatory. So and you can build all this logic by yourself inside the portal. And we can actually make it easy. So here you see it's with a Cryptomathic logo, but we can easily change that, and we can adopt the processes. So here, for instance, when you add signatories, that screenshot you have on the right-hand side. So we will actually look into the in the directory if these users exist, if they have been registered, and if they have been registered, they have a green tick, and then you can circulate the invitation across the organization. It is available through a browser-based experience, but also through a web-based experience, through a mobile banking experience. Sorry. So I think that was it on the signing technology as such. I'd like to hand over to Ingolf, who will introduce the Swisscom Trust Services, with a focus later on the implementation of the selected signing service within Swisscom.
Yes, thank you, Guillaume. So I will take over. Why Swisscom? Swisscom Trust Service is the only purely European provider for signatures, electronic signatures for the EU and Switzerland. So as you probably know, we have here two different jurisdictions. The jurisdiction of the EU is harmonized due to the IDES regulation. And in Switzerland, we have a different signature law. It's the 30S. We are accredited as well as in Switzerland, and with our subsidiary in Vienna, we are also accredited for the IDAS, also as a qualified trust service. Please, the next one. Probably you could click through that everything appears. Thank you, stop. So what do we deliver? So normally we deliver signatures for organizations. In the regulation and in the law, this is called seals, organization seals. Also there you have advanced and qualified seals. So this means qualified signatures for legal persons. And we have, of course, personal signatures, which are signatures for natural persons, and which both ensure, of course, the integrity and the authenticity of a person or, of course, of an organization. Next one, please. The personal signatures, we different between qualified signatures and advanced signatures. So the qualified signatures are the only signatures which are regulated by law. All the other signatures, advanced signatures, or even easy signatures where you upload just a picture of your signature or something like this, are of course admitted as an evidence, but they are not regulated by the law. And this means you have also a different burden of proof. If you go to court, if somebody says, hey, this signature, this was not correct with the qualified signatures, the burden of proof is reverted to the other party. Yeah? So you must prove to the court that the qualified signature is not correct. And with the advanced signatures and the simple signatures and all the other signatures, it's the other way around. So you have to prove that these signatures are correct. So wherever possible, of course, it makes sense to use qualified signatures. There are also some other differences which are shown here. So the qualified signatures, please go back one. Yes, thanks. The qualified signatures, they have a higher liability by Swisscom. So we have up to unlimited liability here for the qualified signatures. Also the archiving of the identification and registration data for these signatures are different. So, for example, in the EU, we have an archival period of 35 years. Next one. Combined with the qualified signatures, we deliver always also a qualified timestamp, which is also regulated by the law. And the Swiss law they are very strict. They accept only qualified signatures instead of handwritten signatures if they are combined with a qualified timestamp. In Europe, this is not necessary. It's helpful if you have a timestamp, but the qualified signature is enough. Okay, next one. So here, this picture shows a little bit the integration from Swisscom Trust Services and the Cryptomathic components. So Cryptomathic has, of course, this WYSIWYG signature application, what's shown by Guillaume beforehand. Yeah, so the whole front end part, which is then also installed at the customer's side. And then on the back end, as a remote signature provider, we have then the signer software. And also here we use the signer software of Cryptomathic, which is CC evaluated. So this means common criteria evaluated. And for the technicians, I've seen there are some technical people also in the participants list. This means that the component SAM resides also on the HSM. And then, of course, connected to this signing software, there is our certificate authority with signing certificates for the Swiss jurisdiction and for the EU jurisdiction. But now, and this is now the great thing here, you could also extend this with an external CA, as Guillaume, for example, said, in Singapore or any other Asian country or South America. And then you have the advantage that your private key is still here kept in Europe in the safe Swiss data centers, but your certificate will be supplied then by an external CA, which resides probably in Asia. And the other part then, of course, is then the registration authority, and this remains then always with the customer. This means also that the customer must prove that he's able to identify and register the people, so that is done with an audit. And we, as a trust service provider and certificate provider, will then give a registration authority delegation to this party. Okay, next one. Yeah, I will also now end up what are really the benefits for the selected signing service. First, we have, of course, a trusted partnership. Yeah, so you're working here together with Cryptomathic, a leader since long years for the signing service, and of course with the largest IT company we have in the moment here in Switzerland. And also security leader here in Switzerland. Then, of course, with our trust service, you can cover Europe with Switzerland. Yeah, so with QES, with advanced signatures, which are also shown with a green hook in Adobe. And then you have also the benefit, of course, of the privacy and Swissness we provide here. In special, if you want to extend your service to Asia or to other regions with other CAs which are connected here. And yeah, and you could use, of course, your own identification and your own authentication. And the great thing is that this whole solution is, of course, common criteria evaluated. So this is now the strongest standard which is available in the EU. So by this, I return back to you guys.
Okay, I mean, thank you. I mean, another element which in the implementation can be critical is the modularity of the solution. So the way you integrate the solution, as highlighted, is actually quite unique. So we can still have this direct unbroken security channel, which actually is a key element, as many other providers would actually have an application in between that would actually break the protocol. Here at with Cryptomathic and Swisscom, we have this direct security link with an activation protocol which is designed to withstand attacks and even man-in-the-middle attacks, which is actually quite unique in the industry. I think we're pretty much through with the presentation. Marco, I think we collected some question on the way.
Yes, first of all, thanks to you, Guillaume and Ingo, for taking us through. There are lots and lots of questions we have in the chat, and I think without further ado, we just take one by one. And yeah, if there are further questions, just keep them coming. All right. So first question is around the video identification, and the question is: are we using any standards for the video-based identification? Is there any standards that are used?
Probably I can answer this. So the video identification must fulfill, of course, the ETSI regulations as far as it is used, for example, for Europe and Switzerland. Yeah. So which identification and registration procedure is used depends always on the jurisdictions. So unfortunately, even between Switzerland and EU, there are different laws. So, for example, the identification Switzerland is limited only to financial intermediaries. And in Europe, we could use it for all the parties. And probably in Asia also, you have, again, different rules for this.
Good stuff. Thank you. So next question is about HSMs. And the question, I'll just read it to you. As far as I know, your solution can be integrated with UTMACO and Cypher HSM, certified to PPEN 419, 2215. Now, Thales Luna 7 HSM is also certified to PPEN and that standard. Please let me know if your solution can be integrated with Luna HSM as well.
Okay, I guess I can answer that one better. I mean, the Signer solution is designed in-house in Denmark, and in our HSM Competence Center works with pretty much all HSM platforms, so it's actually quite unique. So we write a so-called signature activation module, which is a firmware that is loaded onto the device. And in order to be loaded onto the device, you need still to fit into the security target. The HSM that we have in the selected signing service right now is an UTMACO CP5, where the SAM module has been written by Cryptomathic and signed in cooperation with UTMACO. Delivery process goes through a secure channel to Swisscom, and it was actually, I must say, quite a challenge during COVID to get the HSMs through, go and pass the border and be installed and operated. Now the solution is live and audited, so it's not straightforward to change a platform on the back end easily. Technically, it is possible to operate on other HSMs. Currently, the only HSM that has the full common criteria certification with our SAM is the UTMACO CP5 today. But if you have a strong wish for other HSM platforms, then you can contact us. But for the selected signing service, it would be difficult to deliver.
Thank you, Guillaume. Next question is about a viewer. So the question is there a viewer available via SDK? And the question is because of the building a viewer into a mobile app.
Okay, I guess I can answer that one too. I mean, the viewer is, includes different elements. The viewer as such incorporates different APIs. So it interacts with the view server, it interacts with the SSO solution, it also interacts with the remote signing service. So, and this viewer is typically built in the mobile app using these different APIs. To connect to Signer, we have this important security channel. Some restrictions. Many actually develop in React Native and execute the JavaScript library locally. But we're working also on having some native apps for Android, but also for iOS to be work with environments.
Good stuff, thank you. Next question is, for qualified remote signing, do you support OpenID Connect or OAuth server for user authentication at the time of signing? I can see you're supporting SAML and OTPS SCUL1.
So the short answer is, if you want to do it in a secure way and reach a qualified level, you need to be able to bind the assertions provided by the SSO to the signature operation, which is used to assign one or multiple documents at a time. And this assertion then represents the sole control of the user, his acceptance, so to say. And with SAML, it's easy to actually add attributes in the SAML profile. For OpenID Connect, there is by default no way to add that in a secure way as defined in the standards. So what we do, and we already do that for other projects in Denmark. So we have an implementation where we have custom attributes, or we use other technical parameters. So we have it available, but that's on a per project basis, because the OpenID Connect specification do not target that electronic signature in this sense. So it is possible, but requires a dialogue with us.
Good stuff. And next question is about usage internationally, and the question is specifically for companies located in Russia who have document flow to clients in Europe. Is that a viable solution here, and what might be the constraints?
I think this is something I answered already in the chat. So this is also depending on the jurisdiction, of course. Yeah. So first you must think about what is the underlying jurisdiction for the applicable law of your contract or of your document. It is not necessary to know where you are sitting. If you're sitting in Mexico or Russia, so if the applicable law is German, you have to sign according to German law, and this means according to the EU regulation. So then you have to use the EIDA signature. If the applicable law is Swiss, then it's Switzerland, and if the applicable law is Russian, then we have to look for a Russian CA who could do this, or have a look to the national Russian law, what is possible over there. Yeah. So generally, yes, worldwide signature is possible, and it's depending on the applicable law of your document.
Great stuff. Thank you, Ingolf. Next question is about, do we also offer queue sealing?
Yes, this is provided in partnership with the Swisscom services, so it is possible to add a sealing to the document. So you could have multiple parties signed with a signature bound to a user, and you could have the whole document sealed with a company seal.
Good stuff. Next question is about the certificate authority. Do you support different CAs for certification?
So in Europe, we use by default the Swisscom CA because it offers the highest assurance level that we can aim for. And another jurisdiction we use can connect different CA providers that very often have different CA technology. So we have a security concept where a finance array has a plugin to be able to interact with third-party CAs. We use open standards for that.
Thank you, Guillaume. By the way, thanks for all the questions you're sending. There's still more coming. Great questions. Keep them coming. Next question is about open banking. Is it necessary to implement a remote signature to maintain PSD2 requirements, or is it possible to use qualified seals on an offline local basis? Maybe not.
I can answer that, maybe, and I think both you prefer to. I mean, PSD2, you have to look at it at different angles. So you have PSD2 for on the user side when you want to ensure that the user provides his consent onto a payment transaction. So in that case, it protects the transaction in integrity, and an open signature is a good tool for that. The other element, but it's not mandatory to use electronic signature for that. On the other part, you have the QES certificates, and these are actually not in scope of the selected signing service. In that case, a short answer is on the QES side, you need to have specialized certificates, potentially with a local HSM or remote HSM as you want to.
Great stuff. The next, I actually take two questions because I think they might be a bit related. So the first one is, how is the electronic signature linked to its owner at the first use? Is there a way to do this remotely? And the second one is how to verify whether the signatory really controls the private key.
Yeah, this is something I answered, at least the first question already in the chat. Yeah, of course, you could use video identification, but be careful again because it depends on the jurisdiction, and there are differences between Switzerland, Europe, and the rest of the world. Now the second question again, please, Marco.
Yes, is how is it verified that the signatory really controls the private key?
Okay, I can answer that. So generally, when you start the signature experience, you first interact with the Vucibus. The Vucibus will trigger the backend, and once the user has effectively visualized all pages, it will establish a session to a component called signer. And that signer is where the key is held. So we first check that the user exists, and if the user exists, then we can, for a given signature operation, send a request to the IDP solution to authorize to actually have a user consent. So we have some out-of-band authorization of the user through a separate channel. If you want to know the details, I mean, we have a white paper that actually includes the actual sequence workflow. So you can text us and you will get the sequence workflow.
Great stuff. Thank you. Next question is, what are the requirements on external IDP for integration with QSCD to generate qualified signatures? What are the requirements for external IDP?
So you need to follow these standard CN 419241-1 and -2, and have an assurance level which represents the so-called SCAL2, so security assurance level 2. And to be able to do that, the assertion needs to be bound to the signatory, needs to be bound to the signature operation, and needs to be bound to the policy.
Great stuff. And now a question which is certainly during COVID very interesting. The level of assurance, is video identification equivalent to face-to-face identification?
Yeah, probably I can take over this. So it depends. For example, in Switzerland, video identification is only allowed for financial intermediaries, and there it's equivalent, yes, to a face-to-face identification. You could not use it for, let's say, insurance company or something else, which is not a financial intermediary, so listed in the Swiss list. And in Europe, it's equivalent to the face-to-face identification. Yeah, it's accredited over there. So, but we have, of course, to have a closer look to the video identification. So not all video identifications can be used. Probably for some of them, we need a special audit procedure.
Great stuff. Now a bit the question maybe a bit into the future also. It's about quantum safe cryptography, and how will this affect applications that are already deployed today in the field? Can we say already something about this?
I can start, and maybe Ingolf, you want to complement after that. I mean, the signer product as such is developed by Cryptomathic, and we're a crypto company. We are very much interested in crypto resistant algorithm. So by default, we have, when you define a key policy, you will define the algorithm underneath. Currently in the selected signing service, it's RSA-based keys that are being used. But we already have the certification which is necessary to deliver elliptic curve keys. So we can easily swatch or swap the key policy in the backend if this is recognized by the auditor. And we're also working on post-quantum contour resistant algorithm. So if from one day to the next we would need to switch, assuming the HSM has implemented the functionality, it can be delivered very rapidly.
I think we have to note that these algorithms must be also allowed by the government, of course. Yeah. So if there is no link between the law and these algorithms, it's very difficult for us to use them. Yeah. Because but ETSI knows this, and there are also a lot of conferences, and I think we will have a change there in the next 1-2 years, of course.
Great stuff. And we're actually running out of time, but I think we have a couple more questions we can bring in, and if not, there will be the contact details provided anyway. So next question is for archiving, and every year, in order to maintain the validity into the future, there need to be time stamped. The question is there any other solution to maintain archived signed documents, for example, blockchain? in order to continuously keep them valid?
There's a new ETSI standard that actually came up, I think that was last year on archival, because it's true. I mean, the timestamp would only tell you that at a given point in time, using that kind of cryptography, then this piece of digital data existed, and that I have a trusted time source. But if the algorithm is declared as too weak, then your loop of trust can be broken. So if you actually want to go and be future-proof in maybe 50 years from now, then blockchain could be one of the technology, assuming that the algorithm underneath are stronger. So it's not an answer by default. I mean, you actually have to look at the security of your blockchain.
Absolutely. Next one is for Guillaume. Is Cryptomathic sign or will be Cryptomathic signer available as a virtual appliance?
So virtual appliance is difficult to define. Here we actually offer a trust service. We have other delivery channels and have some initiatives to package that as an appliance. So, by default, the signer runs on Windows and Linux. It can also be Dockerized or provided on VM. So it could be provided as a software appliance, and we also work with other partners to make it as a potential appliance. So please do contact us directly if you want to get the full details.
Great stuff. And then we come to like references. So can we talk about any references from Scandinavia and or the Middle East?
So in Scandinavia, we work a lot in Denmark, and being a Danish company. So we support some of the most successful teams over there. This is actually not done through the selected signing service, but we have some the technology is used over there. In the Middle East, we also have some trust center. I mean, I'm here. I need to abide to the NDAs, but we have some countries in the Gulf, especially in the banking sector, that utilize the technology also. So, in short, the selected signing service can be connected to some PAs in the Middle East.
Great stuff. And then, yes, the question is if we do provide the presentation. Yeah, we will be providing the presentation. And the question is if we could add like the related standards we talked about. I think that should be possible. Next question is, how did you ensure SCAL2 according to AIDA's regulation for qualified remote seals? Maybe one for Ingolf.
Yeah, I think that's better for Guillaume.
Okay.
I mean, for the seals, you have to identify whether the seal is a machine to machine or if it's a seal to represent a user. If it's to represent a user, then what I mentioned earlier applies. And if you actually work with a machine, then you have to trust the machine with the necessary certificates, and you will have to provide time and re-authenticate the machine against the server. And that is used as SCAL2. But it is true the requirements on the are a little bit loose if you look at only the
Great stuff. Thank you, Guillaume. And actually with that, we will wrap up the session for today. As said, we will provide the slides and also a recording probably tomorrow. And thanks again for many great questions. Thanks a lot for attending, and have a great day, and see you soon.
Okay, very good.
Okay, bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Ciao.